Chair. In 2012, former Immigration Minister Jason Kenney used one-time legislation in the 2012 budget to cancel specific applications. Why does the government need the powers outlined in this bill for application? Like, why couldn't you just put it in a piece of legislation?
Thank you for the question. So currently, no authorities exist to cancel applications en masse. The 2012 Federal Skilled Worker Inventory Elimination was accomplished through legislative amendments.
Right, but why couldn't you just do a piece of legislation?
Because it doesn't allow for the flexibility to define the public interest as well as...
Okay, so you, as the bureaucracy, want to be able to determine that without going through Parliament?
No, the policy intent is to be able to quickly respond to emergencies, crises, health issues.
So why didn't you define what public interest means in the legislation then?
Because there are so many potential instances. So that's why we were trying to say health, security.
But why isn't that defined in the legislation?
Because it just would too closely, I think, restrict us to only being able to apply a recommendation to the OIC.
It's a fairly big devolution of power to the bureaucracy from Parliament. And I'm trying to understand, because there hasn't been an instance given by you or the minister, an example of where that would be used, why that couldn't be achieved by legislation.
So may I offer some examples? Thank you. So quickly facilitate the extensions or stay for temporary residents in Canada following a significant natural disaster. When intelligence is received from security partners, if there's a suspected specific threat of foreign interference, electoral interference, espionage, we could pause any kind of applications in that process.
Why didn't you include a report to Parliament as part of the use of these powers?
Well, I think that we were trying to clearly indicate that there is no clear one path for the use of these powers.
Except for legislation, which has been used before, correct?
Right, which is a very defined portion of a one-time elimination of a backlog. It doesn't involve applications or documents.
Okay, so we've now got to the heart of the matter. Did you guys include this because the backlog's so big and you need to kind of a little bit?
So this is exactly why we didn't go with one-time legislation, such as was what was done in 2012 with Minister Kenney, because that was a one-time elimination of a backlog.
So you just talked about backlog.
The intention
would you ever
of
use
this
it to clear
has
a backlog?
nothing to do with
Chair,
backlogs.
point of order. Point of order, Chair.
Thank you. Point of order, Mr.
The witness has wanted to offer a full statement back. I'm not sure she's had the opportunity to do that on a few occasions here. Let's just allow for that.
Please let her answer the question.
Also not a point of order. Thank you. So I'll just ask again. So you brought up the point of backlog. I'm trying to figure out why I should support this. I'm on the fence, honestly, because it's a big devolution of powers. We've had a lot of witnesses say that I shouldn't. And I'm like, I need you to convince me, because the department has messed up. You guys have, you've said that there's fraud. There's a huge backlog. We all get casework. And now you're telling me that I should give my powers as a legislator to you without any report to Parliament. Why should I trust you?
So, I mean, I think the checks and balances are present there. The transparency through the publication of the Gazette, the conversations that we'll have
What
with
would be published in the Gazette?
any potential options around the public interest to suspend,
What level of detail?
cancel. Very detailed. It would have to be down to the type of application, the type of person. It would depend on the situation. It could involve like I was saying before, in a healthcare situation, if we needed to mass extend healthcare workers because of a crisis in Canada, it would have to specifically say these applications of people who are already in Canada, they would be extended.
Okay.
The level of detail is there. But if going back to the legislation that was tabled in 2012, that is not nimble. It doesn't allow us as Canada to respond.
I have a problem as a legislator giving you these powers, right? It's a big devolution of powers, and I feel like the department and the minister hasn't done an adequate job. And what I would encourage you to do in the short time that we have left is explain this in more detail, because you guys got roasted by the legal community. ethnic media. There's a lot of fear over this right now, and I don't think you've adequately communicated what this means. And that's a problem for me as a legislator.
Right.
I have another set of questions with the time I have left. We heard this week that your department, as part of the bill review, had really kind of devolved the screening of asylum claimants through the use of this one-touch system. It was reported to committee by the head of a union, and it's very concerning. We also had stories from Global News that Hamas terrorists have been granted asylum claims. Your department couldn't answer an order paper question on how many citizens, criminals you gave citizenships to.
30 seconds.
What's going on with this one-touch system? Let's start there.
Perhaps I could answer that, Madam Chair, and I'll try to be quick. I'll touch on why we introduced One Touch, how we went about developing One Touch, and what One Touch is. And in fact, cast your mind back a few years ago, we were facing fairly significant volumes, overwhelming volumes at the border. And what we're
Hashtag welcome to Canada volumes. Yes.
Ms.
and we were-
Rempel-Garner,
and-
kindly let him answer the question.
And so at that time, the practice was to actually adjourn a lot of these claims. And what that did was actually to push the risk inland and actually push the volumes inland. And this committee itself observed the number of the delays it was taking to get eligibility decisions with that practice. And so, in fact, our frontline staff who were looking at how can we do this better, how can we do this differently, worked to develop a new process, which is what
It's a self-declaration.
Ms.
That's
Rempel-Garner,
wrong.
your time is up. I was just allowing our witness to complete his answer.
So fundamental to One Touch is it is not a self-declaration. In fact, the front end of it involves an in-depth review, by face-to-face interview, collection of biometric information, assessment by a highly trained and experienced border services officer who will make a determination based on the level of risk. Based on that level of risk, if the risk is low, we will then allow the administration portion of the assessment to be moved
Was the
inland.
head of the union lying? Was the head
I'm
of the
sorry.
union lying?
Thank you, Ms. Rempel-Garner. Thank you, Mr. McCrory.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to go back to the mass cancellation powers. In earlier testimony, you've outlined that these powers could be used in cases of fraud. Do you plan on using them should the bill pass to address cases of fraud? Are there any active cases that you would use this on?
We don't have any active plans to use it, no.
So there are no active plans at present to use the power whatsoever?
No.
So then why did you propose it?
We proposed it on the tail end of experiences that we learned through COVID, where we saw that there could have been a need to have a mass power to extend or pause documents, applications. And so we thought that it was a good idea to be able to respond to crises, emergency situations
So Ms.
in a
Lang, if
nimble
you're sitting
manner.
here, we're sitting here in 18 months from now, and I pull this testimony up, you guys won't have, and I'm doing ATIPs on you guys, there's nothing that you would have been planning to use these power for? Absolutely nothing?
So we have no plans to use the power. We're not going to turn around if the bill passes and start submitting an order in council. I mean, there are going to be areas of the department, there could be groups that come to us to say, hey, maybe we should look at this. Like, there's emerging threats on a daily basis.
I don't understand why it's in here then.
Because we don't know what's around the corner. So
Yeah,
we need that
you-
flexibility.
I also don't understand why you couldn't use legislation.
Because legislation takes a super long time to pass.
But this is a pretty big power, right? That you're
It's-
asking for,
It's a
so
big
shouldn't it
power with
require?
a significant amount of checks and balances. It's not
How,
one minute.
because you don't come to Parliament through this, right?
Point of
Point of order. I love my colleague Michelle. However, for the health and safety of our interpreters, this is difficult.
Is if you have no plans to use this, and there wasn't really a circumstance in the past where you needed it, why we should devolve these powers to you without any parliamentary oversight? Like, you're not making the case for me here, and I'm honestly on the fence.
Right.
Mr. Zuberi has raised some points about defining the powers. Why would we give you these powers if you don't plan to use them? Like, give me an example.
So an example is 6 months from now, we have intelligence that, You know, a country called Mike is planning foreign espionage, and we have received an uptake in applications. So we see that there's something weird going on. So instead of looking at these one by one, allowing these people to come into the country, tying up border offices, we could put in a recommendation to the Order in Council to say this cohort of applications with name Michelle Rempel-Gardner coming from Mike country applied here, we will pause and we will review them and we will try to build a case to see whether or not this is a risk to Canada.
But don't you have that power already today?
We don't have that
You do
power
under
already today.
ministerial distraction,
We
though,
do
right?
not. We do not have the ability to pause any kind of processing of applications. Mass,
I think
case
you
by
do,
case.
Actually, I think
Case
you
by
do. I
case.
think if you look through it, you do. I don't think you guys have made the case, and that concerns me. I feel like you guys are hiding something, and that's the fact that you haven't defined the powers.
there's
That there's no reporting requirement. I think you guys kind of swung and missed on this one a bit. And I would encourage you to try and rectify that in the 48 hours that we have before we have to start amending this bill. Because you haven't satisfied me as a legislator. And I think that there are other people on this committee that feel the same way across party stripe. We don't trust you. And so we need to have, you said that there's checks and balance in this legislation. I don't think there's enough. I'll leave it at that. Did you provide any advice to the minister on any other measures to reduce incentives to abuse the asylum systems that weren't included in this bill?
I can't comment on advice to the minister. We're here to talk about the measures that are being studied by the committee.
You can,
we look
though.
at
No,
kind
you
of how the
can.
system-
Actually, that's a valid question for the committee. Did you provide any advice to the minister, yes or no, on ways to reduce the abuse of the asylum system that aren't included in this bill?
1 minute.
I mean, we look at the system all the time in terms of how is it working, what can we do to improve it, whether
What's
that's
not included in
procedural.
this bill that could reduce the incentives? How about, let's say, restricting the access to federal benefits to emergency health care for failed asylum claimants? Would that reduce the incentives to abuse the system?
I mean, there are many things that could be explored. There are also pros and cons to each of those. You know, individuals such as failed claimants who are here and potentially subject to challenges with removal may find themselves in health emergency situations.
That's
and
why I said
require
emergency
support.
benefits, right?
So,
What about the pre-removal risk assessment process? Why didn't you recommend, or did you recommend limiting pre-removal risk assessment appeals or a new pre-removal risk assessments to when there's substantive new circumstantial change?
so the pre-removal risk
Very
assessment
quick,
process
15 seconds.
for those who already have had an Immigration and Refugee Board decision only looks at new evidence that
Like
has
what?
occurred since.
Ms.
So any
Rempel-Gardner,
change-
I'm sorry. That is time, you guys.
Thank you.
We have to go.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for appearing before us. I'm trying to get a handle on why you need the massive power of mass cancellations. You seem to have some concern that, or maybe disrespect, I might add, although that's a hard word to accept, I know. Doing this through legislation. You commented that legislation takes a long time. Well, there's a reason why legislation takes a long time, because it requires parliamentary oversight, debate, review, in a lot of detail before we get to a point where we have a piece of legislation in front of us to discuss. And here we are today with a piece of legislation that, quite frankly, we were not expecting. And we do have it before us. You don't want to go through the legislative process. You want this massive power that can override what parliamentarians as legislators are really elected to do, is represent the people. So please explain why you cannot respect what's been done already so far, the legislative process, and now you want this massive power where you can say, this is good enough reason for me, country Mike, country, Susan, whatever. I want to be able to have the power to do it without asking any elected official of the people to have an opinion.
Thank you for the question. Yeah, I mean, I think that we have seen in recent times the world has changed and we have seen such different emerging threats, whether they're health, whether they're safety, whether they're security, fraud. And the Minister of IRCC does not have this power unilaterally. The decision rests with Governor and Council, who acts on behalf of Cabinet. And also, on the advice of Cabinet, the Governor and Council will consider
1 minute.
all of the views of the Government of Canada collectively. So it ensures broad scrutiny, alignment with overall government priorities, and has a system of checks and balances.
We only have as you just heard the chair, so let me just get in on that a little bit. These are new regulatory executive power. The minister does have that authority because that's the minister that's going to prepare that memorandum to cabinet and is going to go in there asking for the sweeping power without coming back to Parliament. At a time when Mr. McCrory has testified before this committee, there's already 30,000 people in the country that they can't find. Okay, at a time when we're talking about a one-touch system, that he has a different opinion than the elected person of the union of the employees that under Mr. McCrory's direction. They came here with a voice as well. Their morale is down. They're not happy. They're not satisfied. Mr. McCrory, you may want to paint a different picture today because you may be at odds with what Mr. McCrory says, but the fact of the matter is you represent the same people. So for us to overlook all of that and say, just give the sweeping powers on to the minister, the 7th minister in 10 years, that can say, we want this minister, go in and get it for us in order in council, and ignore Parliament and the will of the Canadian people. You understand how difficult that is for us as legislators to accept, do you not?
So we have 30 seconds. Sorry, I was wrong with the time before.
So I really do think that the use of these powers could be handled in the public interest, and the order in council process with a whole of government approach, taking in considerations from all equal members is part of our government process, and I think that the checks and balance and the transparency is present in order to help this move through.
That it would be in the public interest not to have people with criminal records walking around the streets or waiting to complete their 45-day term so they can finish their
Thank you,
their
Mr.
screening,
Menegakis.
okay?
Thank you, Ms. Lang.